In the 1970s, parts of the Bronx were burning so frequently that fire crews stopped responding to smaller blazes. Entire blocks collapsed into ash. Insurance fraud was rampant, landlords walked away, the city quietly wrote the borough off. And yet today, that same land now hosts luxury waterfront towers, six-figure salaries, and million-dollar apartments. So how did the Bronx go from the most abandoned place in America to one of New York's most aggressively revalued pieces of real estate? To understand that transformation, we need to go back to the moment the Bronx didn't just decline, it was deliberately left behind. By the late 1960s, the Bronx was already under pressure. Manufacturing jobs were leaving New York, middle-class families were moving to the suburbs, highways cut straight through established neighborhoods, displacing tens of thousands of residents. Then, the tax base collapsed. As property values fell, landlords stopped maintaining buildings. Some discovered it was cheaper to burn them down for insurance than to keep renting them out. Fires became so common that the phrase, "the Bronx is burning," entered American vocabulary, not as a metaphor, but as a literal description. Entire blocks were abandoned, schools closed, banks refused to lend. The borough became shorthand for failure. But the most important thing wasn't the crime or the fires. It was this: land in the Bronx stopped being priced as land in New York City. Because the next chapter wasn't recovery, it was survival. By the 1970s and 80s, the Bronx wasn't just poor, it was ignored. City services pulled back, private investment disappeared, redlining made mortgages nearly impossible to obtain. But while residents stayed, ownership quietly changed. Large landlords, shell companies, and absentee owners began accumulating property at fractions of replacement cost. Buildings were traded for pennies on the dollar, tax liens piled up. The city itself became one of the largest landowners by default. To outsiders, the Bronx looked uninvestable. To patient capital, it looked like something else entirely. Because the borough still had one thing going for it: location. 4 subway lines, direct access to Manhattan, riverfront land that could never be recreated. The fundamentals never disappeared. They were just ignored. And when fundamentals are ignored long enough, they create opportunity. That opportunity didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived quietly, one building at a time. The first signs of change weren't flashy. They were boring. Nonprofits started rehabilitating buildings. Community groups stabilized blocks. The city began reinvesting, cautiously. Then something critical happened. Crime began to fall, not overnight, not evenly, but steadily. As safety improved, lenders slowly returned. The Bronx wasn't being discovered. It was being repriced. And that repricing accelerated fast. If there is a single force that changed the Bronx's trajectory, it was the waterfront. For decades, Bronx riverfront land was industrial, polluted, and ignored. Then, developers did the math. Views of Manhattan, subway access, land costs far below Brooklyn or Queens. Suddenly, luxury made sense. High-rise apartments appeared along the Harlem River. Rents that once seemed impossible became normal. New residents arrived, professionals, commuters, investors. Median prices followed. Neighborhoods that once struggled to attract buyers now saw bidding wars. New builds pushed valuations higher across entire districts. And just like Harlem, the narrative lagged behind reality. The reputation stayed frozen in the past. But the prices didn't. Because reputation changes slowly. Markets don't. And that disconnect created one final shift. The moment the Bronx stopped being optional. By the 2000s, New York had a problem. There was no cheap land left, Manhattan was saturated, Brooklyn had fully revalued, Queens followed close behind. That left one place: the Bronx. Investors didn't move in because it was trendy. They moved in because they had no alternative. The same forces that transformed Harlem repeated themselves: infrastructure, capital inflows, demographic shifts, rising rents pushing demand outward. Today, parts of the Bronx routinely see apartments selling near or above the $1 million mark. Not because the borough lost its history, but because New York ran out of places to ignore. And that is the final truth about the Bronx's transformation. It wasn't rescued, it wasn't saved, it was revalued. Once the city could no longer afford to overlook it. The Bronx didn't change overnight, it spent decades being abandoned, dismissed, and undervalued. But land in New York never stops being land in New York. Eventually, fundamentals override reputation. Location overrides memory, and capital flows where it was once afraid to go. The Bronx didn't become expensive because it became perfect. It became expensive because it was inevitable, and by the time most people realized that, the opportunity was already gone.